Good evening. Welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm Sam Chase, your host, and with us this evening is, and I'm going to pronounce this correctly, I hope, okay. Latosha.
Correct, Latosha.
I've heard some variants, but
yes.
It's Latosha Dixon,
yes.
who is a candidate for the Select Board in the upcoming April election. We will have an election on April 6th, townwide, and this is a contested race. Correct. There are, I believe, 4 candidates now running for 2 seats.
Yeah.
I will simply, I will give you a little bit of an introduction. Latosha currently serves as Vice Chair of the Diversity, Racial Equity, and Inclusion Committee here in Chelmsford, which is a recently formed committee, and you can talk a little bit more about that if you'd like. But right now, we'd like to ask you to just give us a bit of a brief biographical sketch, so to introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. My name is Latosha Dixon. I am a resident of Chelmsford. I've been living in this town for almost 3 years. Back in September, I joined the Diversity, Racial Equity, and Inclusion Committee. With that, I have learned a great deal about the town. I did a lot of research prior to moving to town, so I knew a few things already. I come from the South. North Carolina is my home state, but I moved here from Georgia. And my parents were small business owners. So I was introduced to local politics at a very young age, and since then I've continued to be involved as much as possible in different advocacy groups or local politics.
That's very good, and I believe your professional background is that you are a
scientist.
A scientist?
Correct.
Correct.
Yes, protein chemistry, and I work for a large pharmaceutical company, and I just celebrated 20 years at that company.
Wow, that's great. That's a tremendous milestone. It's a great background. I have an awful lot of respect for anybody who goes into the sciences. Yeah. I'm a finance guy, okay. But still, anybody who does any of the what I call the hard sciences or engineering disciplines. It's a very rigorous curriculum, yes. And I have a lot of respect for anybody who gets through that and then executes on that as a professional. I think that's great.
I kind of think of myself as a product of STEM because, yes, I was late 80s, early 90s. I went to magnet schools where we focused on science and mathematics, and that's where my interest was piqued around 7th grade. Mm-hmm. And from there, I continued down that path, and I ended up being a scientist.
Yes, well, now we have a live example and an advertisement for STEM programs.
Yes,
absolutely. Right here. I think that's great. That's great, and I'm glad that the public schools in the last 10 or 12 years, I think, have really emphasized that. It's just very, very important.
It is.
That we have folks that go into those particular areas. So I think the first question I'd like to ask you is, you indicated that you've been in town about 3 years now.
Yes.
And you've developed a pretty good appreciation for the flavor of the town. So what is motivating you at this time to seek public office and really the highest public office that we have in town?
It's a fair question. Thanks for asking. Mm-hmm. So 2020 was like no other year that we've ever had. And the social injustice movements of last summer really struck a chord with me, along with the pandemic. And I decided that I didn't want to just be someone that sits on the sidelines. I actually want to be an active participant in solving some of our problems. I can't explain it other than it's my time to serve, mm-hmm. to serve in a public office, to help promote positivity and also get things done.
Okay, and that's a fair answer, and hopefully that is the motivation, at least the base motivation that most people would have for seeking public office.
Yes.
So
now with the Select Board, it is traditionally the Select Board's responsibility to be the overall leadership for the town. Mm-hmm. I am a natural born leader. It just happens to be who I am. I think it has a lot to do with my father being in the military and then entrepreneurship. And my desire is just to see where can I contribute in Chelmsford to change some of our policies and actually just start looking forward to some innovative ideas that we can incorporate here in town and be a leader for northern Middlesex County.
Okay, that makes perfect sense, and I think that leads into sort of the visionary aspect of why you would like to be on the select board. And you have to forgive me because I said Board of Selectmen for 70 years, so I'm really trying to make that change, and,
Yeah.
and I'm having some moderate degree of success at it. So
It is quite okay.
I think select board is really the correct term and probably should have been all along. There are several issues that generally are hot buttons around election time. And these are questions that you would probably get asked in any debate running for the select board. The position on the split tax rate is something that's of interest to folks in town, both on the commercial property and the residential property side. And that's a vote that the select board has to take every year, because under state law,
Yes.
it is the select board that actually makes that decision.
Correct.
Not the town manager,
No.
not the board of assessors. That is your decision alone to make. So have you given this any thought as to how you might approach that particular subject?
Yes. Well, when I think of taxes, I look at the different amenities that we have in town. The roads, our grade A public service departments, such as our police and our fire departments. And as a owner of a property here in town, I feel like my tax dollars are being used well here in town. 82% of the properties in Chelmsford are residential. And that just leaves the rest to be commercial, industrial, or either open space.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I am okay with paying a higher tax as a residential owner and giving a break to our small businesses. According to Massachusetts law, small business is a business that has a value of less than $1 million and less than 10 employees. And coming out of this pandemic, we're going to need to support our small businesses that have really struggled through this past year. So at this moment, I'm in favor of a higher tax for residential over commercial.
Okay, so you would be looking, presumably if you get on the board, the present split is at 22%.
Yes.
Okay, so you might be looking to modify that
Yes.
somewhat.
Somewhat,
Yeah.
not to an extreme, because it is a burden, and we can't expect the residential, all of it to come from the residential.
Okay, that's good. And you will get plenty of information from the assessors to help you make that decision in
Correct.
terms of the historical performance and the valuations and the increases and so forth. So, okay, that's good. Another issue that interests people in general, and although it's abated somewhat because of the development in the recent years, but the affordable housing issue, specifically 40B. And just to remind viewers, 40B is state law that essentially overrides local zoning in terms of density and so forth. How many units can you put on so many square feet of a plot? And the local control boards, which normally would be planning board, they don't have anywhere near the control over a 40B or a state mandated affordable housing situation. So with that as a backdrop, do you have any views on 40B, good, bad, how you think the town should address any proposed 40B developments?
I like what you mentioned about the Mass state law, because oftentimes I feel like people forget that the select board, the planning board, they don't have to abide by certain laws, but we do. We are constrained by those laws. As far as affordable housing, I support affordable housing in our community, not only because it's good for individuals, it's good for our community as a whole. Having affordable housing allows people to live independently. That's good for our young adults that are just graduating from college and starting their careers. It's also good for our elderly who might be living on a fixed income, and everyone in between. Also, what 40B allows is less strain on our court systems. There are fewer foreclosures. There are also fewer eviction notices. So it's good to have that because it brings different people to your community. And with bringing new people to the community, you bring new skill sets, potentially new jobs. So I'm a supporter of the 40B, affordable housing.
Are there any modifications that you think might be in order to the present 40B set of regulations? What's been suggested in the past is, in order to give communities a little bit more input or control, perhaps the law could be changed to allow planning board participation in the process, that kind of thing. Is there anything that you think could be tweaked to improve the regulations as they now stand?
Yes, it's always good to go back and revisit, especially after a certain amount of time, 2 years, 5 years. But at the moment, I am in support of the state having that standard for all cities. That way, we're aligned as a state.
It's a level playing field among the
Yes.
communities, right?
Right.
Right.
So-
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Following up on the 40B question, land use, zoning, and things like that, and you've probably noticed, I'm sure you've watched town meetings and you've watched many of the planning board meetings and so forth, where projects are brought forth and they go through that process, or in the case of a town meeting, the planning board may suggest zoning changes to particular areas of the town, and these are always very controversial, and for some people, very emotional
Yes.
discussions. When people start talking about land, their land, other people's land, these discussions tend to get heated and emotional. So how do you feel about that situation in terms of how zoning changes should come about and should be made? And I'll get quite specific here. We just went through a situation where the planning board denied permitting a project for the center village in the center of town. The proposal was to have a 32-unit condominium put right behind where the Santander Bank is in the center of town. And as part of that overall project, the developer was going to do a certain amount of rehabilitation of the Fisk House and the Oddfellows building. And there was a tremendous groundswell of people. I think there was a petition advanced, and I think it was 2,500 or 2,600 signatures. People signed and said that they thought that that particular development did not fit that particular area, and the planning board did not allow the developer to go forward, which is somewhat unusual in town. Usually these projects, after a period of time, they get changed and so forth so that they more or less fit the areas they're going into. But I think the feeling on this one was that people just didn't think it fit. It was too big and so forth.
Right.
So that's a good example of the kinds of give and take and push and pull that we have on this particular issue. So could you comment on that and give us your opinion on how you feel that whole process of development and zoning fits into the vision of the town?
Okay, sure. With regards to the recent development, I understand that the residents of Chelmsford just felt like the property was too big. I also feel like it might have been just too soon after the Geist Mills project, and people saw it as too big of a change too fast. Do we have the infrastructure to support such large complexes in our downtown area? So as a town, I think we need to look at our infrastructure, our parking, our long-term plan before we actually commit to one of these larger projects. Chelmsford is 24 miles north of Boston. We are a suburban town, and with our land use, it's mixed. We have residential, we have commercial, we have industrial. What I've seen in town is that in certain areas, our commercial space is vacant. We need to bring more jobs and more industries to those areas and fill those spaces. So Chelmsford is going to be a mixed community, have mixed uses for land. I'm not certain if I have a vision of us being a complete suburban residential. I really don't see that. I think we do need a mix. Because we have the space for it. We're in a prime location. We're off of 495. We're off of Route 3. So it makes sense to have commercial properties here in our area. As far as the town, the 50s and 60s, we had a huge boom in population growth. A lot of single-family homes were built during that time. Since then, they've begun to age. Also, our community is getting older. So we need to be able to attract younger families to this area. So we do need some properties such as apartment complex, condominium complexes. I think it's going to continue to be a give and take with whether it's the planning board or the residents doing petitions when they really see something that they're not comfortable with. And did I answer your question fully?
I think so, and I think
Okay.
and I'm really intrigued with your answer because obviously you've done some homework and you've thought about this issue, and I think that's very important. And if you're going to be on the select board, that's what you're going to have to do. Is you know, you're a thoughtful person, you're an intelligent person, and there is a lot of homework that you're going to have to do because you'll have to get up to speed on a variety of issues. And you know, you've thought that out very well, and I think it's a complex issue because again, it's very emotional for a lot of people. I mean, I've always joked. The town meeting, we have 162 elected representatives to town meeting, and the fall, traditionally, the fall session is the one where most of the zoning articles get advanced. And every time we get into a zoning situation, I've always thought, well, now all of us are zoning experts, which we really aren't. Okay,
No.
but that's the way the meeting seems to go. So it's.
But you know, none of us may be experts, but because we are passionate, committed representatives of town, I think we come with the right intentions to do what's best for the town of Chelmsford.
I think that's right. You know,
Yes.
I think that's exactly right. So. That's great. Now, why don't we move on and talk a little bit about the schools and public education. We have a unique situation here. You come from another part of the country where the structure is different. In Massachusetts, as you know, the school is not an autonomous entity with regard to taxation or raising revenue. The schools rely on the municipality to provide the money. So that creates a certain amount of tension, obviously. And there's always a push and pull between, you know, how much of our taxes go to support the schools versus how much go to support all of the other things that are not school related that the town has to support. So if you could just give me a little bit of an indication on how you feel about that relationship and the educational situation in Chelmsford in general, and perhaps draw on some of your experience that I'm sure you may have done some work on your committee, so that could play into it as well, if you want to talk about those things.
So public school education is critical to our future in this country, and we really need to put a lot of emphasis on it. This past year, a lot of children were remote. Some had hybrid situations with their schooling, and I'm concerned about our children and how much they've lost this year There's the term summer slide, where kids lose a lot of the information that they've learned over the 12-week break. And I'm concerned about a COVID-19 pandemic slide. As far as funding of the schools, I support the town, a large majority, I should say, of funds going to support the schools. Arts are important, music are important, science, engineering, mathematics, all of those things are important. I mentioned earlier this evening that I'm a product of STEM. When was the last time our laboratories in the schools have been updated with new equipment? Especially our high schools as they're preparing to go off to college. Bunsen burners aren't used anymore in the industry. So I feel like there needs to be resources to the schools. In addition to that, I would love to see Chelmsford try a new and innovative idea for our school year. Maybe not now, but in a couple of years, it'd be nice if we had year-round school, where children are in school for 45 days straight, and then they have a 3-week break. You can look at it as 9 weeks with a 3-week break. By doing that, it allows kids not to have the summer slide. It also gives them time to relax, refresh, rejuvenate for the next quarter. It also is very helpful to our teachers. It's also good for the schools because the school facilities are being used year-round. They don't have this long period of time of lag. So that's the vision that I have for the Chelmsford public school system. I will be upfront and share that my son, I do have a 12-year-old son, he's not attending Chelmsford public schools, but every family has different needs. And so I've chosen a private school for my son, and that's what works best for us.
Yes, and I absolutely agree with you 100%, and I would never, ever criticize any parent because your primary obligation to your child is to do the best you can for your child. And if you are in a position to give your child that kind of an advantage, I say absolutely. You know, that's something you should do as a parent.
Right. But as far as the schools in Chelmsford, they actually have a very good rating. Greatschools.org has Chelmsford Public Schools at 8 out of 10. The children score very highly on their exams the state exam that they're required to take. There's a lot of different programming here in our schools, so I do feel like Chelmsford has done a really nice job with their schools.
And do you have a sense from your observation, or maybe talking with folks that are closer to the situation, do you have a sense at how well the administration is working with our town administration?
Yes. So I do have a very good sense, and I've been watching the school board meetings as well, and it seems like there's a very good relationship there. I think my only suggestion I would have is for us to reach out to Massachusetts Municipal Association to see if we could get more funding for our schools. There's been a lot of concerns or statements that I've heard that Chelmsford doesn't receive as much funding for their schools as surrounding towns. And I believe that organization could probably be an advocate for us so that we can get more funding.
Okay, and that's good. So now that leads into questions about the overall resources that the town does have to spend on its own operations and the school, the town budget. So I think you said when we started the discussion, you said that you were an advocate of people paying, through the property tax, and you felt that you felt that actually a Chelmsford resident gets a pretty good bang for his buck. I think that's how I would interpret what you had to say. So, would you like to expand on that a little bit and perhaps give us some thoughts on the current situation with the town budget and maybe how you see the priorities, and maybe could they be adjusted in any way? So, if you would like to amplify that would be good.
From what I've observed by reviewing the town budget for fiscal year 2021 and 2022 is that we have a balanced budget. We have some surplus. I would like to see us continue to build on that. I also would like to commend our town manager and our select board for us having a AA credit rating, which means that we've been in good standings, not only for a short period of time, but for an extended amount of time. If we needed to borrow money, we could. And that speaks volumes to how well this town has been operating. I feel like our municipal organizations, like I mentioned, the police department, the fire department, they're operating within their means. There's nothing excessive. There are some issues that we have in town that we need to address, such as our sewer, and that is going to take big capital to address that. And we need to create a plan for dealing with that issue because we don't want to be the smelly town.
That's for sure. The board recently has come up with a vision and values statement, and that was an initiative that was driven over the last 2 years. How do you see that working into the overall administrative effort of the town? Do you see that as sort of a guideline, or how would you?
Absolutely. Whenever you have a vision and mission statement, it just gives you a direction in which to go in. In addition to that vision and mission statement, our select board just recently signed a proclamation against anti-racism, hatred, and discrimination. That is also a vision for our town, something tangible for us to hold on to, not only as residents, but as business owners and employees of town. So I see Chelmsford making some really positive steps for showing that we are a community, a strong community, a community that works together.
And you feel, as a member of the Diversity, Racial Equity, and Inclusion Committee, do you feel that the Select Board has adequately supported your efforts? I mean, you just mentioned the proclamation. So.
Yes, I do feel that they have adequately supported the Diversity, Racial Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Initially, when we brought the proclamation to them, there were questions, and that's fair. There should be questions. And they took some time, revisited, provided us some edits, and the edits weren't so different that it took away from the essence and the meaning of the proclamation. Since then, many of the select board members, I believe perhaps all of them, have signed the anti-racism pledge in addition to the proclamation.
Okay, that's something I'm not aware of.
Yes, so there's a pledge for an individual to take to state that they are against racism, discrimination, and hatred.
Oh, okay, that's, I was not aware of that. Thank you for mentioning that. So we have about a minute and a half, Latosha, and you are a candidate for the Select Board, and you are a relative newcomer, so I'm going to give you a minute or so just to pitch your candidacy and perhaps ask for the vote, and you're on.
My name is Latosha Dixon, and I'm running for your Chelmsford Select Board. I am choosing to run because I really and truly believe in this town, and I want to help prepare a better future for us. I am a single mother. I am a scientist. I am a resident of this town. I am looking to just support in any way possible to advance our community, help us to be leaders in the Middlesex County region of Massachusetts. And I politely ask for your vote on April 6th for the Chelmsford Select Board. Thank you.
Well said. And how is the campaign going thus far?
So far, it's going well. With the pandemic, we can't do the things that we traditionally do, but it's been going well.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Latosha, for appearing on the show, and very pleased to meet you, and I'm very happy that you have decided to run for this position. And we look forward to seeing the progress of your campaign.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
You're
it
very
very
welcome.
much.
Well,